Hey everyone, like I said before, thank you all for coming. Thank you to everyone who has joined us virtually. Um, this is our first exhibition of the year. It's also, no offense to every other exhibition we do, but one of my favorites. It's near and dear to my heart. This program is what brought me to Northern Clay Center, so it's one that I really, really enjoy. I've gotten to work with everyone in this exhibition really closely. So it's one of the things that mean an awful lot to me. So I can't thank you all enough for coming and listening to these artists speak. Yeah, big ups. I love it. Crowd has got it going on, but they're being very respectful. So anyways, that's enough off script talk. Just wanted to thank everyone. But my name is Sean Lofton. I am the Artist Services and Education Manager here at Northern Clay Center. Well, I know that many of you are tuned in from across Minnesota and the United States. I would like to start by taking a moment to pause and respectfully acknowledge that Northern Clay Center is located on Dakota land. To begin, the Emerging Artist Grant Recipients Exhibition has long been one of the most exciting annual events for me, as it allows our entire community the opportunity to celebrate emerging voices in the field of ceramics, while providing them a platform from which to receive the recognition of their achievements. And it's both a benchmark and launching point for the next steps in their careers as makers. Like I said, so exciting to see everyone's work change. Back on script. The last grant year was truly phenomenal as we played host to so many incredibly talented ceramic artists. Wanted to let everyone know, in case there are any technical interruptions, this talk is being recorded. We always add all of these to NCC's YouTube channel. In case you are disconnected, you will be able to see that as soon as we're able to get it edited and added to our YouTube channel. I also wanted to mention, if you are tuning in virtually, you will have the ability to see the virtual tour of the exhibition within the next 2 weeks. And the exhibition will be available starting tomorrow at 10 a.m., going till 5 p.m., 7 days a week. So I would encourage everyone to come back and really take it in when there's not free food, free drinks, and there's a little more room to explore. Anyways, I'm really having a hard time with the script. This afternoon, we have a schedule of presenters who will be sharing brief insights into their award year, their history and their backgrounds as makers, and how their work developed throughout their residency, with their goal being to allow each of them equal opportunity to talk about their work and experience. I do ask that we keep a few things in mind while we are meeting today. To minimize interference with the presentation, we will keep everyone muted for the duration of the presentation. We respectfully ask that anyone who has questions, please wait until the end of the talks, where we have some time reserved for questions. Just before 5 p.m. or after our 2 virtual presentations, we will take just a brief moment so everyone can get up, walk around, stand up, use the restroom, and then we'll jump right back into our in-person presentations. So I will give everyone a time on that one to come back. And we'll just keep rolling. But all of us at Northern Clay Center are incredibly grateful and fortunate to host these incredible artists and be able to provide these opportunities. And it's with the generous support of our community that we're able to do these things for these incredible artists. Having seen the incredible impact these awards have had on the lives and careers of grant program alumni and myself, we look forward to our continued work to support future recipients and ongoing development to the field alongside those that make all of this possible, namely the artists. Collectively, I would like to thank Rick and Maureen Cox of Cox Insurance and Associates, Continental Clay, and Smith Sharp Firebrick Supply Company for their support for our Fogelberg Studio Fellowship Program. This residency opportunity is one for emerging ceramic artists from Minnesota and Wisconsin whose work is strictly functional and who has a specific interest in pursuit of a career in studio pottery. During the 2023-2024 residency year, Carley Holzem was NCC's Fogelberg Studio Fellowship recipient. Carley will be joining us virtually. She will be leading our presentations today. After Carley, we will also hear from the recipient of NCC's newest studio fellowship, Akshar Patel. Shar came to Minneapolis as the recipient of this third BIPOC studio fellow. This residency was developed to support the studio practice of one ceramic artist of color working in a functional, sculptural, or installation-based manner. The program is funded internally by Northern Clay Center, and we're all incredibly excited about the future of this fellowship. We will also hear from our 2023-2024 Anonymous Artist Studio Fellows, E.C. Comstock and Harry Malesovas. The Studio Fellowship is awarded to emerging ceramic artists working in a functional, sculptural, or installation-based manner. The Anonymous Artist Studio Fellowship is made possible by generous contributions from several anonymous donors, as well as NCC's Recollect program, which directs 100% of the income from secondary market sales of donated works from our local collectors to these fellowships. We would also like to thank Ron Lindy and Rob Ostrander, who make generous annual gifts to an individual who is pursuing a career in pottery or actively researching historic pottery methods as ambassadors of the Pottery Museum of Red Wing. In conjunction with the funds, on behalf of the foundation, their contributions supported the practice of Ivy Mattson as the 2024 Pottery Museum of Red Wing Award recipient. Sorry, everybody, it's been a long week of reading emails. I'm getting a little tongue-tied. If you have any questions about any of these award opportunities or where you might land in terms of your own eligibility for the programs, I encourage you to connect with me so that I can answer any of your questions or guide you to the correct application forms on our website. In the 2025 winter catalog, you can find information about all of our grant and residency programs, including the inaugural year of including the third year of NCC's BIPOC Studio Fellowship. And for anyone interested, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to connect with you personally and talk you through all of our opportunities. We're going to go ahead and get this afternoon of presentation started off with Carley, and then we will roll through our order. Again, we're going to take a short break after our virtual presentations, and we will join back shortly after that. I'm going to hit the lights after that incredibly long introduction. Thank you all for your patience, and we'll go ahead and turn the floor over to Carley.
I'm Carley Holzem. I use she, her pronouns, functional potter and ceramic artist. I grew up in Mosinee, Wisconsin. It's a pretty rural area in the middle of nowhere, very peaceful compared to I'm in New York now, and it's definitely very different. And then I moved to Menominee, Wisconsin to get my BFA in ceramics from the University of Wisconsin Stout in 2023. But I will say I kind of started in art in high school. I had a really amazing high school art teacher, Katie Maratz. Some of you might have heard of her. But she kind of led me down the little throwing functional pottery path. And then in college, I also had Kate Morey and Jeff Wheeler, which are also two very talented ceramics professors, pottery as well. And the pictures on the screen are just photos from my hometown. That's my dog in winter. And then just a nice trees and stuff. You can go to the next. So in college, I kind of became obsessed with these Neolithic tripod pictures. So the picture on the right is the original one. They were originally made to heat water over a fire. I really enjoyed how they looked at animals such as birds and their long necks and the beaks to kind of convey dramatic gestures, and putting all of those pieces together to make a whole I was more interested in. So I copied them a lot. I made a lot of these on the left. These are mine. I was firing a lot of cone 10 reduction kilns at the time because I was Kate's TA, teaching assistant. So I mixed up this Celadon glaze and I don't know, I was just more interested in how to make movement in pottery because I really like how you could make something look alive. You can go into the next slide. And then for my thesis exhibition, I made a breakfast, lunch, and dinner set. So over COVID, I was kind of just rummaging through my dad's garage and I found a fence. So I took a part of the fence apart and started cutting the pots I was making and using it as a faceting tool. So that's, you can start to see I'm using the texture that I have been using now since then in this collection. So this is also my thesis. I was kind of experimenting with how I can use moments within the day and the feelings of colors. So here I'm actually using cone 6 clay and glaze so I could get brighter colors because I'm really interested in how I can express myself through colors more than in a reduction kiln. It's more about the process, and it's harder to get brighter colors. So the breakfast set is supposed to be a little bit softer, and it's a light pink because in the morning, I'd imagine you're just waking up and it's calm. And then for the lunch set, I used a bright yellow, and it's just supposed to portray the sun. And then for dinner, it's supposed to be a little dinner party having with your friends, and the dark blue, light blue celadon is just the sun setting kind of. And then you can go to the next slide. And for my actual opening, I invited my friends to sit at these tables and eat together because I kind of wanted to um, make it the full experience of how these ceramics would be used. And it was really great because the people who were in the gallery could only watch them. So it was kind of like a scene. You were interrupting their like intimate moment. So that was my first kind of performance, and I hope to do more in the future. It's just a little difficult with food in the gallery. It's not always accepted. Then the next. And then after college, I moved to Waconia, which is near Minneapolis, and I drove to my studio every day, or every most days. Um, and when I was here during my residency, I had a lot of time to focus on my functional work. So I had like a part-time job, but I would say mainly I was only in my studio for like 6 hours a day, roughly. And so that allowed me a lot of time to make new test tiles and switch to cone 10 oxidation. I stuck with a similar color palette, but it's definitely more vibrant, and I fine-tuned it a little bit better. And doing a cone 10 oxidation makes me feel more comfortable with its functionality. It's more durable, and I just trust cone 10 for some reason. Feels right. And then you can go on to the next slide. And so here I also just challenged myself since I was in the studio a lot. I just challenged myself to make bigger forms. This was my very first table on the left, but you can also call it a bird bath because it does not have a flat top. And it did warp a little bit, so I'm still kind of on the adventure of figuring that out. But it was really great to try to make large things out of porcelain. And then on the right is my cupcake stand that you can actually take apart and put back together. I really like the idea of stacking, and I started mixing colors here too. You can go to the next. But Northern Clay Center honestly just allowed me to play a lot with forms and colors. In college, I would say I was more focused on the concept of how everything worked together and the experience of seeing the pottery. Here, I actually got to focus on fine-tuning my forms and my glazes and just putting in the time to do all of that. So, by what I mean by play is on the left, I got kind of stuck in forms here and there. But this was a very new coffee pot idea on the left. I will say I absolutely love coffee. So I usually make what I love to like, since you use it, I just make what I use the most almost. And the coffee pot is something that I'm trying to perfect. So that's one of my newest little adventures. And then, though I don't smoke, these are ashtrays in the middle. And then the olive oil and vinegar set was just kind of fun. And you can kind of see I still try to use the gestures. Another thing I like about faceting too is it kind of limits the control I have over the clay because I can also be kind of finicky and controlling with like the perfect shape or the perfect curve. So that's something I really liked about faceting. Then you can go on to the next. And another thing I discovered in at Northern Clay Center are ceramic drawings. I never thought of this before. This was my very first time doing this, and I'm really happy I did it. So originally they were supposed to be a tray, but then I was like, not everything doesn't need to be functional. I was very in like the functional mindset. So I thought back to college. I was making these monotype prints in college where you layer three glazes on top of each other. Not glazes, sorry, inks, and you put a transparent base in it. So that's kind of where I got my underglaze texture and glaze, all of the layering idea from that actually. And in those prints, I was still using my skewed perspective and the colors ideas as well. Um, and I only represent queer, non-binary, and women in my drawings as well. That's just always what I've drawn in the past, and I can't seem to not do it. So I'm continuing that into my ceramic drawings. So you can go to the next slide. So Northern Clay Center was great. And now I moved to Port Chester, New York, to Clay Art Center. And here I've actually been teaching quite a lot. I've been teaching adult throwing classes. It's been really amazing seeing other people's perspectives of throwing and of their like art path. So I started throwing in high school. So teaching people who are older than me and them falling in love with the craft as well makes me feel really lucky to have like started throwing at such a young age and have the knowledge of what I have. So these are some projects that I've made for my students in my advanced class. So the jars on the left, the tulip here, and the basket. I'm also teaching a couple beginner adult classes, which are really fun too, because it's just messy and it's great to see them learn. So you can go to the next slide. Um, so actually teaching has been influencing my own personal work as well. I like to think that my work kind of reflects what I'm experiencing in life. So I'm kind of learning from my students, making me teach them to throw large. That's like really difficult for me. So that's really good. And just teaching myself new forms so that I can teach them. And so that's where the overhang lid jar came from, was actually teaching because I never did that before. I wasn't, for some reason, some things just don't cross your mind to explore. And then in the middle are three cups and a tray. So here I'm kind of interested in dabbling, just like mixing around my colors like crazy. So you saw before I was more like organized with my work, but this feels almost more me because I like a little bit of chaos. I don't know. And then on the right is a tulip here. And I did my first cone 10 gas oxidation with someone helped me here at CIC. It's been a long time since I fired one by myself, so I wasn't about to test that. But this came out really great. And you know how big gas kilns are. So I really had to fill it with some random things to fill it. But you can go to the next slide. So with that, some of my colors. So I keep talking about how important color is, and I really like this painting, Rothko. He allows for really great depth with how he layers his paint. I know it's not ceramics, but it's really interesting to see his color palette and relate it to my own. So usually I just make stuff and I don't really think about who inspires me until afterwards. So this is just something I've noticed. And he also um, likes to attach mood to paintings, which is kind of, in my mind, universal in a sense, and a lot of what pottery making and just drawing people, it feels really universal. It's something, it's a universal language we can all see and relate to, which I kind of like the dark purple, as in like being a little bit moodier, and then the bright yellow, lighter, and then pink is usually related to skin. So I'm like kind of thinking about all of those things. Then you can go to the next. And so another thing that I got out of the gas oxidation kiln are some more ceramic drawings. And looking at Rothko's paintings made me think like I need to layer more underglazes together. So like really building that color so that it shows through and there's a more definite image there. So hopefully these don't have holes in it, but I'm gonna have to make them wall hangings. They are reminiscent of a picture frame, so I'm going back to like the home and the domestic space, and I kind of want them to seem like a picture that you'd have on your family's wall, and they're just like a gallery wall of them. And they're supposed to be just image of queer people living their everyday lives, candid and posed, kind of an intimate moment of your life, just a moment, and still working with incorrect proportions. And these drawings go through a lot of process. So the original drawing actually looks nothing like what these look like on the finished product, because as we know, you can draw and do the exact like inlaying and do your underglaze perfectly fine, put the glaze on, and it always ends up turning out different. So I'm always kind of trying to embrace that as throughout the process, and I like that. So my drawings, I never actually erase anything. I draw in marker because I want it to be more immediate and just from the moment. So you can go to the next slide. And so moving towards the future, I just want to focus on how functional pottery makes life special. So I think everyone can kind of relate to having that like favorite mug where you use it every day, or just decorating and building your own home. It kind of brings a fantasy within your everyday life. That's how I like to feel with my colors and the shiny glaze. It all is kind of building this fantasy and sugar dessert. I don't know. That's how I kind of ex think of it in my mind. And that's also why I'm expanding a little bit into more furniture. So on the left, you can see I made another table that actually has a flat top. So there's progress there. And I just want to continue making art for queer people and representing my amazing community. And then you can go to the next slide. And that is all I have for you guys today. My Instagram is Carley Holzem's Pots. So look me up if you'd like. And here's my email for any other information. Thanks for listening to me.
Without any further ado, it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Shar. Shar, please feel free to get us started, and I will run the slides for you.
So I'm Shar. I was the BIPOC resident for the year, and this is some views of my older work before getting to NCC. So I made a lot of ceramic jewelry and focused a lot on like line work. So this is all examples of like Mishima things I did, from plates to earrings to necklaces. And then this is like examples of my functional work, where I would mostly do a lot of like painted and like slip trail illustrations onto slab built vases, or I would work with my sister and do bigger pieces where we would sculpt and do like a lot of like just fun things, especially for like being raised in Florida and like working in Florida mainly. We do a lot of sea creatures, so a fun octopus that people would like. So this is about the first month when like I got to NCC and got like more situated with the newer clay body I was using, and just like getting into the mood of work. So the first one on your left is actually a soda fired piece. I've never done anything except for cone electric, like higher than a cone electric like firing. So this was a big change for me, and I had no idea how anything was going to work. The colors were one thing. I had no idea how to use flashing slips. I didn't even know if the porcelain would hold up at the like thickness or anything, or if my shapes would go in, or if they would slump onto the little bead things we made. I forgot what they're called. Um, and the one on the right is gas fired without any reduction, and still just not knowing how my colors would work. So I was just like every time I would paint anything, I was just like, oh, I really hope this color shows up. And I was actually really surprised. A lot of them did show up. A lot of them did cooler things than I was hoping for. And sometimes I'd get weird effects like completely like matte clear looks or like crackling or the weird pigskin effect that would randomly happen. Or even things where like the flashing slip would just be the only thing on top of my underglazes and they would just change the entire color completely. And I was like, oh, that looks really cool. Here's some other like images of my slabs. I usually work pretty thin, so I try to find ways I can figure out what to do with that. Like before I got to NCC, I was only making basic cone shapes, and it was a lot for me just to like go into a regular cylinder. I was like, oh wow, I shouldn't try that. That's too like pushing the envelope too much for me. But I was like, okay, never mind, got to do something. And I started playing around with weirder shapes and then stretching them out from the inside. And then I started being able to learn. I was like, oh wow, you could do a lot of stuff with this. And that's how I got that weird blobby thing on like the left. And I was like, oh cool, this looks fun. We fired that later and it ended up being a huge mess because my sister put a very runny glaze on there and it just stuck to the shelf. You could see like some of the ones that actually worked. So this was a cone that I just squared off on all four ends by pushing it from both the bottom and the top while I was building it and then flipping it over and attaching the bottom last. And on here, I was just mostly playing with the glazes because I still had no idea how any of the glazes would look. So I was just having fun dipping, pouring, and then even like putting spots that were just completely bare into the soda. Because for me, like I would never actually use a lot of glazes. I would just stick with my plain clear, and that would be it for me. And then here is me actually like kind of using that fun form, like playing around with the bumps and everything in a way that I actually liked. And this was new for me too, because I'm not really a fan of like plain black and white or like more modern looking things. But I made this and I was like, oh, this kind of reminds me of something fun. And then when it actually came out of the kiln, I was like, oh, wow, I love it. I haven't made another one yet, but I've been planning on doing that again. It actually mixes up a design I used before coming to NCC with that technique and like I just loved it. So you can go to the next slide. Here's me playing around with that, like something like that too, where I was trying out a different clay that my sister sent me from SIO2, I think, is like their Berlin clay. And I've never tried it because I mostly used to stick with porcelain. So I hate different clays. But I was like, okay, gotta use it. And I was like, oh, I have no idea what I'm drawing on here. But I just started beveling it out into weird things. Like, okay, this kind of looks like a ripple. And I was like, oh, well, this space is empty. Let me just add like a weird grid to it. And then I was like, well, I think clear would make it look boring. Let's just stick blue on it. And I kind of actually liked it. It grew on me. And it's just different. And when I brought it back to the galleries here, it actually had pretty good reception. So I was like, okay, great. I might try playing around with that some more too. These are the pieces I made like probably right before in Sika, where I technically did like a soda firing right before then, but the pieces I put into the soda did not come out as I hoped at all, and it ended up getting overfired, and a lot of it ended up slumping and getting kind of gross looking. So these were three pieces that I did not plan on finishing by then, but I ended up just staying up like 3 nights in a row painting them all, and I was like, I need something pretty to go in there, something that I'm more proud of. So I picked these three. I spent all night, like literally 3 days, all night painting these, and then managed to get them out on time. And I was like, okay, I'm in love with these, especially the one with the flowers. That's like my favorite piece ever right now at the moment. And it was a weird that specific piece was a weird creation for me because I did a lot of things I would never do, and I kind of just did them because I was just super tired. And I was like, well, just whatever gets it done. So at some point, I did a perfect transfer off of a newsprint onto my bare clay. And usually with that, I would never try anything to mess it up. But for some reason, my brain just decided to just run my fingers down and smear all the black lines down and make it look like it's melting. And for some reason, I was like, I really like it. And then when I was doing my underglaze for that, the next stage after bisque, I decided to use my color, like my green underglaze, at the strongest I ever used it without diluting it, which is usually something I never do. And I did that, and I was like, okay, I did it on one leaf in the back. I was like, oh, don't like that. Tried wiping it off. It would not wipe off. So I was like, okay, I got to do it all over. And I did. And one of the things I did after that too is knowing how a lot of these underglaze worked like individually, like how my reds tend to wipe off nice and easy, my blues tend to stain, and my greens tend to stain the worst. I was like, okay, if I'm gonna wipe this off, I want it to at least look like I did it intentionally. So every leaf on there was fully covered in solid green underglaze. And with every sponge stroke, actually, the sponge can only go straight down. Otherwise, you would have a green smear that looked totally wrong. So that was one thing. I had to keep smearing the whole thing only down, and that was fun. And then I decided to use my other underglazes into for that, where I started off with red, and it was a random underglaze someone actually just put into my palette. I had no idea which kind it was. I just knew it was some kind of amigo glaze. I had no idea what color red, but it reacted so much better than my other reds in like brushability wise. So I was like, I love this red. And then I did like three flowers, and I was like, I ran out of this red. And after that, I was like, okay, what else can I do? I was like, okay, I have some pink. I was like, okay, let me make some flowers pink, but this pink does not brush on that well. So I was like, okay, let me make it look like a gradient to look like a variegated flower. And I was like, okay, great. But I was like, oh, well, some of these might not look good pink. So I was like, okay, one of my favorite techniques actually onto porcelain for illustrating is using a very watered down dark blue underglaze and using that around any like objects that I want to appear whiter, because it's kind of like the same principle that goes with whitening teeth, where they use blues and things for that, or like having anything blue makes whites look whiter in general. And I decided to do that, and it's always something that stuck with me because it worked pretty well. It would like at least for me. And I decided to do that on the remaining flowers because I was like, there's not enough time. And honestly, once it came out of the kiln, I was more than happy, and it's still like my favorite piece. Like constant, like every time I take that anywhere with me, I'm always like, I really hope no one buys it because I kind of just want someone to break it or just crack it a little bit, so I have to keep it. And towards the middle few months, I would kind of say like once I started getting into the gay community more in Minneapolis, I started like playing around with forms more, and I decided to play with this. I was like, oh, this is fun. I was like, I don't have to make just plain cylinders or shapes now. I can actually like try to draw pictures. And then I was like, oh, I can actually try making bodies or something. And it happened by accident because I made one weird shape and it looked like a body. And I was like, oh, maybe I should try it. So I started trying it, and it was a lot of fun. And the other thing was it was kind of actually pretty easy because you had to work really quickly with these thin slabs. Otherwise, they just want to crack all over you. So I was like, what can I do really quickly and still like make something that gets attention? So I was like, okay, naked. It's like that's what works in my like social life. So I was like, okay, might as well try it out here. And I did, and I had a blast. I learned the hardest thing to sculpt this way though are nipples. They just want to crack on you a lot. But then I decided to add textures, play around with that, and then I've been also trying to find other approaches to coloring like my pieces because painting in the lines takes way too long. It's way too stressful, and it's just not enjoyable sometimes. So I was like, okay, I just want to go kind of willy-nilly with this and just use a lot of colors. I want people to see it from across the room. And I wanted people to see it in their homes and be like, oh, wow, this is fun and exciting. It brightens your day. So there's one example on the right where I kind of just threw a lot of colors at it. And I used a lot of orange because that's just my favorite color. When I was making that piece specifically, I put three layers of color at first, which I loved. And I probably should have stopped at that, but I decided just to keep pushing it more. And I was like, next time I'm just going to use those three colors. This is where I was experimenting more with my Mishima. I haven't really done a lot of Mishima while I was at NCC until like I would say July-ish or something. So I haven't touched it in forever. And I decided, I was like, can I still do this? And I just decided to try it. And the first few were kind of mess ups, but within the week I made these two, and I actually really love them. Where that one on your left is actually like super tiny, if you can see my thumb and everything from it. But also like I don't know how close you can see it, and like if you ever get to see the sides of it, it has the ripples all the way to the lily pad, even like the bends of the leaves and like all that, and even like the petioles on the flowers. And then also on the right, I kind of took a different turn. This is something I would not normally do at all, but my friend kind of got me onto Alexander McQueen lately because he was showing me all this cool stuff, and then he showed me this cool skull bracelet and everything, and I was like, skulls were on my mind, so I made a skull. And then I was like, okay, the skull needs a body, and I was like, I don't know how to make this thing look relaxed. It just looks very stiff whenever you did it. So I decided to make it look like it's laying down. And then when I did that, I was like, oh, he kind of looks sad. So I put some spikes on him to make him look like he had a halo of light. And I was like, okay, now he looks like he just has like a crazy hairdo. So I was like, okay, let me add some lines to fill in this like background space. So at this point, I kind of wanted to make it feel like, what did these lines actually represent? And the first thing I thought about with the skulls and everything was like kind of life and death and like living your life for yourself or living your life for your job or living your life for other people. And the first thing that popped into mind was one of my other siblings who is a surgeon and constantly seeing them like having their like just time eaten up by work, constantly like having to run around, save lives, have all the pressure on them. But at the same time, they're so highly like put onto a pedestal because of their knowledge and brains and all that and all the education. But at the same time, they're being run down by their bodies and stuff to the point where like they're just a workhorse. So I really wanted to represent a lot of that. So where the head is being pulled up and like into a greater light, but then the bottom's just being dragged down by those other ones, especially the hands. I value my hands a lot, like being an artist. So it scares me thinking like the people are going to be doing jobs that just ruin them or just make them mess up because I'd be so sad if I lost my hands. And then this is where my illustrations are kind of heading at the moment. I'm trying to find ways to like get more detail with slip trailing still, where you can kind of see that with the bird. In real life, you can see it. It's a lot clearer and a lot more like distinct around the details. But then I kind of wanted to play with the contrast of having really crisp details along with very loose, like almost like muscle memory details, where you can see the leaves underneath are just very one strokes at a time for big things. And then on the right, I've been playing around with color a lot because I'm like, I have too many colors to pick from. I keep using the same colors. I just really need to branch out more and find ways to fill in a space without using all my time drawing one small thing. So I've been trying looser ways of drawing the flowers and everything, but then much looser ways of filling in the colors and the backgrounds and even taking some of my old drawings and just using colors I just would not use at all. Like that smaller plate with the flowers on those are magnolias. Usually I would make those white, yellow, and add like a little bit of red and stuff, and I wouldn't add too many crazy colors around it. But this time I decided using my favorite color, orange, decided to throw some pink in there, and then maybe some just random spots of red and like even spots of blue. And I was like, okay, fun, that's fun and then filling in the background with all anything I could think of to fill it in, just because I hated seeing the blank space. And this is probably one of my most recent pieces right now that it's been like leading me to. So after like having a year of like becoming like part of the community in Minnesota, I've learned a lot about people and like communities and everything. And one thing I learned about was relationships. That was a lot of fun, kind of. And so this space came along with me just being like, what do I want to draw? I was like, well, uh, my customers kind of really wanted me to draw something that had more like naked bodies. And I was like, that's not really what I like doing. But I was like, I'll try it out. So it started off with this lady on the left, and it tried being very tasteful at first. And I was like, I do not know how to do this. So I was like, okay, well, she looks kind of lonely. I was like, so I added a guy next to her. Next thing I know, I was like, okay, well, it looks like she's just floating in midair. I was like, let me put a crate under her. And then I was like, okay, well, now he's just sitting on nothing. So I put some bricks. And then I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, they look like they need to be doing something. So I added some cigarettes in their hands. And so they're just sitting there smoking. And then I was like, oh, you know what? What are they doing? Why are they sitting around naked smoking? So I was like, you know what? I'm I think what they really are, they're prostitutes. So I was like, okay, this is gonna be my prostitute project. So I decided to put my feelings onto there after being in a relationship. I was like, fuck love. So I was like, okay, let me write that in big letters. And then I was like, you know what? What else is happening? Like, let's just have fun with this. I was like, okay, let's just throw some money in there for fun. Let's just throw some bottles of wine in there for fun. Let's throw some more cigarettes. And like, oops, one of these cigarettes decided to spark a fire. And oops, the door's locked. Okay. And then let's just play with some gold luster. And I was just having a blast with this. It was so much fun. And then luckily, like even my mom, when I was making this piece, she was like, I don't know how I feel about this content. But when it came out of the kiln, she was like, you know what? I actually really love it because it was just fun to look at. And then next thing I know, we took it to the gallery, and luckily, a very important person got it. And I was like, awesome. And now we had to make some more. So that's probably going to be the next route. And the coolest thing about this is it's me and my sister working together because I do not throw at all. And she is a very good thrower. So a lot of our pieces at the moment have been going in that direction where I'm focusing more onto illustration at the moment. And she is helping with throwing larger, bigger canvases I could draw on. And then right now we're currently just doing our shows and working with the galleries that we have down here still. And from next on that, we're still figuring it out. But here's my Instagram. It's bomb.road.studios. And then my website is bombroadstudios.com. You can find us on Facebook at Bomb Road Studios, or you can email us at bombroadstudios@gmail.com. And that's about it.
Let me start by saying a tremendous thank you to both Carley and Shar for taking the time to meet with us virtually. Thank you everyone so much for joining us for those first two virtual presentations. We're going to switch over to the in-person presentations now.
My name's Comstock. I use all pronouns. I fear I have the bitter and alienated temperament of a Dostoevskian protagonist, a chronic difficulty effectively communicating warmth. Underneath it, I have enormous reservoirs of care and tenderness. The rub lies in a profound personal weakness consisting of bitterness, libidinal fixation, and fear that inhibits the transmission of it. I arrived here for the residency following several years focusing my practice on new materialism, a niche branch of study centering the agency of non-human matter. By attuning to the vibrancy of matter, cultivating a oneness with material, I felt it possible and made it my aim to collapse the artist, viewer, object triad into ecstatic oneness. Present in my aim was a number of wholes, one of which is articulated well by Maggie Nelson in her book on freedom, 4 Songs of Care and Constraint. The presumption that makes a sculpture or writing a novel is somehow on par with entering into an intimate relationship with a viewer or reader with all the emotional responsibility such a relation typically entails is a mistake. And this is my honors thesis work from that train of thought. So rounding some kind of bend on that thinking, I haven't expanded beyond my new materialism, but rather taken a step back into a humanist realm to be willing to incorporate a question of emotional responsibility in the work, to choose a grappling with relational weakness. What follows here is the evidence of the grappling and a calculated agreement I came to with the ingredients of affection, which is the primary shortcoming of my temperament. Hopefully then, excavating something in the process about the nature of care and discipline, affection and stoicism, the role of force in it all. The formal seeds were these molded cardboard pulp packaging forms you'll see throughout the work. These are the most troubling kind of care. The quality that makes them good at cradling is the same quality that makes them single-use objects. They are wasteful and tender in their specificity. Something fleshy was growing in the cavities of these structures, giving form to the contradiction I was increasingly aware of, that to be tender, warmer, softer, to be more responsive to the feelings of others, required less sensitivity to my own, rather than more. It demands a stoic handling of one's interiority through fortification and discipline. Forbearance became of the utmost importance, an indefinite, unsexy cultivation of distress tolerance. Here's one forbearance holder. There's a subterranean place processing everything that gets in the way of forbearance. The sludgy byproduct that the process generates collect in stoic caches. There's a stillness to the byproduct held in this piece here, emerging from something volatile. You'll see spent engine oil in a couple pieces. It comes from the grinding of metal on metal. Shot peening is one method of strength through force, and that's mostly a metal cold working process where small spherical shots bombard the surface, dimpling it and causing compression stress, which makes the material less prone to fatigue and corrosion, more resilient. I've invoked this idea heavily. The shot peening park is a place of my making whose mythos is woven throughout this body. The park grants forbearance to those who pass through it. The clunky and fragile vestiges of care are abraded away before they can be misunderstood. Deep wells of intuitive knowing are abundant, and the park is vast. Relatedly, it's almost foolishly convenient to think I might also absorb a stony undergirding from my medium of choice, a material that I'm forcing through several state changes, whose particles come from eroded rock, which will return to stone, which tolerates all of this. I soda fired a lot of work in the show. There's something especially penetrative about soda. I think the spraying and the clay takes it. As the kids would say, it takes a lot of violence to become gentle. In tandem, the work became about fashioning implements as extensions of the self, bridging inadequacies, tools for affection. The tools had already proliferated by the time I realized the irrationality of them, producing a number of breakable, unidentifiable instruments for the purpose of this kind of transmission. Yet I don't associate this irrationality with weakness, but rather with the kind of ill-informed earnestness that must be accepted within affection, that's vital to it, that is constitutive of the affectionate act. So I took that valence of these objects to its natural conclusion by leaning into the proliferation. Many of these tools comprise the plots of land within the Shot Peening Park map tablescape here. They are bound by their trays, delineating the edges of the plots. The table dimensions binding the map are the same as my work table, which bound the creation of this work during my residency. There is a certain kind of generosity found only through contraction. Limitations are a vital part of affection. Think of the literal confining motion of a hug. Here are some of the portraits you might find in the museums and galleries of the Shot Peening Park. These initially came out of an attempt to visualize the sensation of absorbing psychic hits along the way of becoming/being stoic. One in progress there. I almost wish I had left more gaping. The tool arsenal I had generated necessitated research through use at this point. So when I came here from Montana, I arrived in Powderhorn, and my neighborhood became the site of fertilization for all these notions of warmth and force and transmission. So that's where I pulled my neighbor subjects for testing, who appear in this video. The context for the research was an open-ended invitation to use the tools, which resulted in highly lateral uncoverings of their efficacy. Playful, indeterminate, divinely stoic, and divinely feeling. So I hope you get the chance to watch some of that. Coming up post-residency is the NCCA affiliated show I've organized in Salt Lake. A few people in this room will be in that show. I am planning to continue to base my work here, wanting to explore the allure of the normal next, make some books. So thank you. Thanks to the jury who picked me, Harry and Sean for being great community while I've been here. Thanks to my neighbor subjects for your participation and support. This is where you can find me. Thank you.
Thank you, Comstock. That was great. Wonderful. Well, that brings us to our next artist. Well, without any further ado, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for coming out and hearing all of us talk a little bit about our work. As they said, my name is Malesovas. I was one of the ECAR residents here for 2023, 2024. So a little bit about early Harry. I was born in California, but I grew up in North Carolina, and that's where I actually continued my education. I went to the University of North Carolina at Asheville. I came into my undergraduate studies thinking that I would be a history major. I had always liked history in high school, and I'd always liked art in high school, but I was very convinced that you couldn't make any money in the arts, and so I had to do history. Little did I know that there's no money in history either. So I actually was pursuing history my freshman year, and then one day I was like, you know what, I just want to do it. I want to take an art class. I've got room in my schedule. So I decided to take 3D design. I'd never really gotten a chance to work much with the sculptural medium. I'd always done 2D artwork in high school. And one of the first projects we had was to do a project where you transform one object to another in clay. You had 5 steps to transform, maybe a snail to a lock. I chose to do a fist to a head. And I loved it. I'd never worked with clay before, and I connected instantly with the medium. It just felt very intuitive just to kind of form clay with my hands, and I loved it. And so the next semester I said, you know what? Okay, I'll take Ceramics 1. I'll pursue this a little further. And after taking that Ceramics 1 class, I decided this is what I want to do. I want to pursue a Bachelor of Fine Arts with a focus in ceramics. This piece right here in Snake's Pit is one of my pieces I made during my Bachelor of Fine Arts show. I created this body of work after struggling for a large part of my life with repressing a lot of my emotions. I think for a lot of my early childhood and early adulthood, I felt that it was a burden to tell other people about any other emotions besides happiness. So I really just kind of packed everything deep down inside me. And then one day, as I got to be a little older, it kind of just hit a breaking point. I realized this isn't working for me, but I had no skill set to be able to really identify what I was feeling. So I started going to an art therapist, but it was terrifying to really start diving into this kind of culmination of all these feelings I had within me. And I created what felt like a monster. It felt like a monster to tackle. However, after working with my art therapist and starting to pick apart the different things I was feeling, I realized that each individual piece was not nearly as powerful as the whole. Looking back on maybe a relationship I had with my sister where I was mad at her for, eating my sandwich, not so scary. But when you take all those emotions and put them all down and pack them inside yourself, it can feel terrifying to deal with. And so these monsters are a representation of that inner self that's kind of dealing with that monster within, all those emotions that make up the whole. While dealing with these works, I started to create larger and larger sculptures. This piece is one of my largest sculptures I created for that show. It's about 4 feet tall. And I had 2 really amazing professors when I was in undergraduate studies who both made very large scale sculpture. And they started kind of teaching me how to create work. This piece is actually in multiple sections. You can see that there's a bottom section, and then there's a middle section kind of right below the waist of that white figure. And then above him is the 3rd section. And lastly, there's a set of jaws at the very top. That is the final piece within the puzzle. I started really creating my work with a lot of color. To me, I was dealing with some heavy topics sometimes, and I wanted to create work that invited the viewer in, not so scary to kind of look at some of this work and deal with some of the maybe emotions that I'm bringing to the table. If it's vibrant, invites people in to come look at it. After graduating, I did kind of an unofficial post-bac with my alma mater and continued working on my body of work that I had created, focusing more this time around kind of on my relationship with God and how my upbringing in a religious household impacted my beliefs, kind of where I am today. And I was teaching Ceramics 1 at my university and working in their studio, applying to residencies. And one day, Sean called me from Northern Clay Center and said someone had turned down the opportunity to be one of the ECAR residents, and he asked if I'd like to take that position? And I said yes. And so I packed up the car a week after getting married, and my wife, myself, and my cat moved all of our belongings up here, and we became Minnesota residents. This is the first piece I completed during my time here at Northern Clay Center. I started building it back home in North Carolina, and then moved it up here to Minnesota. Something that I was focusing on while creating this work after finishing my undergraduate studies was I felt that my work had become very static. It was very like glued and heavy to the pedestal, and I thought that there was improvement that needed to happen in my sculptures. So this piece I thought was very successful in bringing something off the pedestal, giving it a little bit of lift. But I didn't love the work as a whole whenever I'd finished it. I think I was kind of experimenting with different glazings, and I was trying to kind of reinvent myself a little bit and try something new. And this is the first piece that I made here at Northern Clay Center. I built from start to finish. This piece for me is hugely influential. I think it's kind of a turning point for me a little bit in my work. For a long time in my practice, I felt that my work had to be a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Not specific to myself. I felt that if I was more general in what I was trying to display, more people would be able to to see themselves within the sculptures. And then I kind of had this realization that in representing myself and in depicting myself in my work, it actually allowed more people to kind of identify with the feelings that I was having. This sculpture, when I first moved to Minnesota, I didn't really have any friends. I left my family behind, left my friends behind. I was working really hard at my job and working really hard here in the studios. I felt very overwhelmed. I was kind of felt myself slipping into a very depressed and kind of dark state in my life. I thought, what's the best thing to do is make some work about it. So I started diving into these feelings I was having. And in creating this piece, I actually came to a realization that what was going to pull me out of my depressive state was gratitude, feeling that, looking at all the great things I do have in my life. My job is stressing me out, but I have a job that allows me to make art. I don't have any friends yet here, but I have a beautiful wife who came with me to Minnesota and is supporting me. So this actually was the influence for this piece. It's the sister piece to that last one we just saw. And this one's all about gratitude. It's about, looking at all the beautiful things in my life and allowing those, my focus on those to kind of pull me out of this feelings of despair. And again, you can see that was the last piece was a turning point for me a little bit in my work, because I'm continuing to represent myself in my work in the hopes that if people can see the emotions that I'm bringing to the table, if people can see, okay, Harry's willing to explore his depression, but also his happiness, maybe I too can explore these feelings within myself and talk about them more freely. After finishing my time here at Northern Clay Center, I actually got the opportunity. There's a little bit of a trend where someone turns down an opportunity and I snag it right up. I got a call from Anderson Ranch up in Colorado, and they said that someone had turned down the opportunity to take a residency with them, and they invited me to join them for a 3-week fall residency. And it was wonderful. I had an amazing time up there, just continuing to explore within my own work. And I had a little bit of a departure from what I'd been doing. And I decided to make this series of hairy heads. These are my different, maybe different costumes I wear, different feelings I have. But I'm focusing on representing myself within these sculptures and depicting myself. Maybe I feel like a clown one day, like I did something stupid and I feel like, I was a buffoon. Maybe one day I feel like, like I'm being forced to smile, but, I really want to cry. And, sometimes I'm feeling a little holy, like feeling connected to God. Sometimes, I think this one on the bottom is one that if you felt that way before, you can connect with it. If you have not felt that way, then it might be a little scary, but, that's why I make this work. I aim to, highlight feelings that might be hard to identify with and hard to talk about, and create a discussion so that way more people feel like they have space to come forward about their own feelings. Again, when I got to Anderson Ranch, I felt a little bit of an imposter syndrome. I had been picked, not picked last. I had been a runner-up, but I was showing up after someone else had turned down the opportunity, and I kind of was having these feelings of, do I belong here? Was I meant to be here? Am I good enough? And I think I was feeling a lot of anxiety during that time, and it felt like it was weighing on me and eating at me. And again, I use my work to kind of represent these emotions, these feelings I have within. So this is the monster representation of my anxieties I was feeling at the time. This feeling of that weight of like this monster sitting on top of me and eating away at me. And I think what is typical in my work is when I explore these feelings through my sculptures, it tends to absolve them a little bit. They pass, and I can come to cope with them a little bit more. And this is the final piece I completed during my time at Anderson Ranch. It brings me to the end of my presentation. This piece, I think, is one of my most successful, and I'm super excited about it because, as I was talking about earlier, I've been trying to really focus on how can I make works that feel like my monsters are alive? How can I make them feel like they have a little bit more motion? And I was making these wall pieces, and they really allowed me to kind of tackle that. This is a multi-section piece. It's actually 6 different parts. The head's separate, the arms are separate, the legs are separate, and the body is one piece, and they all fit together. And I really love this piece. It's also highlighted a shift I've been on where I'm focusing less on doing washes over the work and really just focusing on 1 or 2 centralized colors, and allowing the details to kind of blend back a little bit. So that way the viewer has to do a little bit more work to try to find them. And I don't kind of just do all the picking out for them. But this work is kind of about what I'm moving forward to in my career and what I'm trying to leave behind. As I discussed, I've had struggles in my life with my mental health. And so this piece is about leaving behind those struggles, leaving behind feelings of self-hatred or feeling like feelings of anxiety and depression, and moving forward in my life, knowing that I have a lot of beautiful friendships and relationships, moving forward in my life with excitement for the opportunities I have coming forward. As Comstock mentioned, we have a show coming up at NCECA. I have another show coming up in New York in August. So I've got these beautiful opportunities coming up, and I want to focus in on the positives of my life and leave behind a lot of the negatives. Thank you, guys.
I'm going to turn the floor over to Ivy right now.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for sticking with us to the end here. As Sean so nicely said, I'm Ivy. I had the opportunity to be awarded the Pottery Museum of Red Wing Award in 2024. And first, I really think that nostalgia is embedded in my bones. From the moment I started developing memories, I would reminisce, drawing pictures from my growing imagination in reference to my loved ones, like my grandpa Bob, who I called Bop Bop. I still call him that to this day. He's probably watching right now. Hi. He helps me fly high above the world. And as I've grown in myself and in my work, I try to find celebration, magic, and playfulness of my memories that are both real and imagined. So I have to be very intentional with this mode of creating to celebrate the past in order to prevent becoming lost in my intrusive ruminations. And in doing so, my grandma Bonnie's influence appears throughout my work. So growing up, we would dig in her gardens for worms to go fishing, making a rod with a stick that I found under a willow tree and just a fishing line from the garage. I would feel badly for the little worms that we found in her garden, so I actually would kiss them before Bonnie put them on their hook. After casting and catching sunfish through the afternoons, we would head inside and pipe pastel frosting swirls onto bright cakes in the kitchen. So I aim to inspire reflection and connection through these sweet treat influences and memories in love. But when I was little, I also spent a lot of time with my mom's mom, who I called Amma, which means grandma in Icelandic. As a tiny little thing, my Amma would dress me up and take me out to play in her garden. And inside, much of my time with Amma was actually spent watching cartoons. Wow. There, I would always ask for white ice cream with chocolate sauce, please. I wouldn't call it vanilla, and I wouldn't ask for chocolate ice cream. It had to be my white ice cream with chocolate sauce. I would smash it a million times just to get the right consistency, and it was kind of like a milkshake, mostly just a goo, and it was glorious. I've made a few stemmed ice cream bowls for this show in homage to my time spent with my Amma. I miss her dearly, and I feel called to the study of memory specifically, as she passed from Alzheimer's and dementia while I was in high school. It was really hard to watch my ice cream buddy forget little things, then forget me, and eventually forget herself. But I hope to honor her through my work in a celebration of her joy, but I still feel called to question our processing of memories. I loved artistic endeavors like cake decorating from a very young age, but it was not until I was a junior pursuing my bachelor's in art education at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, that I actually found clay. I had focused primarily in printmaking before, but in taking a requisite Ceramics 101 course, I was suddenly hooked on clay. So post-graduation in May of 2020, I held my studio practice at the Plains Art Museum in Fargo, North Dakota, while teaching elementary art. All during the tumultuous time that was and is COVID. My work on the plains was the beginning of my exploration of space and movement in functional wear, as seen in this old plains platter that I created after finding this old photo of me and my cousin Paige on some sort of childhood adventure. Then in the fall of 2022, I began my Northern Clay Center journey when I moved from Fargo Moorhead to Minneapolis with my partner, Will. Here, I enrolled in the Minnesota New Institute for Ceramic Education program at NCC. And in this intensive program, I studied history and theory of ceramics while developing my body of work. This program changed the trajectory of my life as I taught part-time art at a local high school and then dedicated the rest of my time to my studies. The photo on the left here is of a work created at the beginning of MinNice, with the one on the right as my last piece of my time in the program. Now, my wheel-thrown and highly decorated and altered work projects a unified sense of my wonder and curiosity, values that are echoed in my teaching practice. I was able to transition interpretations of experience into my work in dynamic fluid forms, and I even developed my own glaze palette with a glossy microcrystalline movement and semi-matte supple surfaces. So my past will always inform my present work, and this Art Nouveau Tiffany stained glass lamp hangs over the kitchen table of my maternal grandparents' house. And this lamp is one of the many things that passed down to my aunt, who now lives in this home. It is here that the women of my family gather to cook, share stories, and laugh loudly. And it is from this lamp that I found the beginning inspiration behind my work in general, finding fluidity and jewel tones with references to women in my world. So upon receipt of the 2024 Pottery Museum of Red Wing Award, I was able to dive deeper into this love of stained glass segmenting and translucency or illumination. It is a direct result of this that I was able to discover this translucent porcelain clay body and now utilize it in my work. So in 2024, I researched clay bodies, created new carved designs, and brought to life what I now call my window work. In many of the pieces in this show, you will see segments of cut out and reapplied spaces with sections of imagery. These are meant to act as windows into experiences. While referencing specific feelings and motions in my functional wear, I really hope that this process of magical remembrance translates to its user in order to revitalize one's present moment in light of our past. I hope to open a window into memories to inspire connection and conversation. So to get the leaf design in the window on this specific mug, I was actually inspired by the etched designs on this lady's writing desk that is on display at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. When I first found this desk, I was with my dear friend Ellie, and we marveled at the beauty and care of the design and really considered what its owner could have written. Thinking about connective, swooping, curved designs, as seen in this mug, continue this 18th century French reference as a method of emphasizing feminine strength and self-determination. So these windows have been taken further into these little pools of memory, as I have created dual wall-hanging platters and bowls for this show. In my work, I aim to capture feminine love and care with whimsy and wonder as seen in Cicely Mary Barker's Flower Fairy series, which gained popularity just after the Art Nouveau era in around 1923, but which colored my childhood through books and calendars. You will also see my sentimentality in Nouveau-influenced sprig molds that I created out of a belt from my grandma Bonnie, and the handle of a hutch my partner and I restored that is now a staple of what I call home. You can also see the cake-like drapery, window view, and climbing vine garden in this Blue Dawn mug. And if you want to see the belt in person, I'm gonna be wearing it tonight. Next, of course, I need to talk about Catherine. Catherine, or who we called Iceman Mayberry, was the best friend a person could have. She inspired me beyond belief with her hilarity, creativity, and zeal. In 2022, she passed away, but now I find her all the time in my work and my life. Her femininity in nature, in home, in remembrance, everything revolves around her. So in grief and in love, I tell stories in my work like I am able to send my pots as little letters to my Iceman. Now, next to my name on many of my pieces, you will also see a little daisy stamp. So this hilarious woman had a tattoo of a daisy on her right butt cheek. So now she's with me always and bringing joy to those who engage with this functional wear. She's right by my side, even if they never knew her and never really know why there's a little daisy on the bottom of my pots. She's always there. And in 2024, I lost another friend, but this time feeling ripples of loss in different ways. My research has now led me to create larger panels of direct iconography. In the photo on the left, you can see my sketch and the beginnings of my slab with a Queen of the Night flower and an accompanying jay. This Queen of the Night blooms only one night a year and reminds me of the fleeting nature of life. The jay, however, acts as a sign of protection and love from the self or a loved one. So the work is now moving towards scaling up my sprigs, or what I consider like 3D prints, in more sculptural senses. So the bisque piece that you see here on the left is something that I wanted to make for the better part of the last 2 years. It's a self-portrait, but as Medusa, with references to the Art Nouveau women, as seen in Alphonse Mucha's famous posters. But in braiding the snakes of my hair, I find strength. Behind the portrait lies halation, or a halo effect, reminiscent of Christian religious panel artworks, but with an overlay of that same women's writing desk florals, highlighting strength in the feminine. Creating a positive of this sprig with translucent porcelain, I pulled the sprig as I would a print, threw ribbon skirts to frame, and cathartically cut away the eye to reveal the bird's eye view inside. In the dark, this wall hanging becomes illuminated to reflect on truth, light, and strength within. I look forward to growth in this explorations of translucency, memory, and feminine experience through functional wear. In addition, I hope to create more three-dimensional carved molds in order to further the versatility in form and function. In 1839, English poet Philip James Bailey wrote, quote, "Ivy climbs the crumbling hall to decorate decay," end quote. It's very easy for me to become lost in sadness when looking back, and thus my work acts as a recognition of the decay, but also a reframing in the present to find joy in remembering. So thank you, Ron and Rob, the Pottery Museum of Red Wing Award patrons, for contributing to the ceramic arts and providing accessibility to delve deeper into my work and my research. Thank you, Northern Clay Center and staff for providing the space and community in which to learn and grow. And thank you everyone here for coming and engaging with this talk. And I'm excited to see where this journey leads and really hope you enjoy the show. You can find me on Instagram at Mud and Ivy, because I'm Ivy and I like to play in the mud, or at a complicated Wix site that'll probably be changing sometime soon.
Ivy, thank you so much for that. That was truly wonderful. We are going to be cutting it a little close, but we do have about 10 minutes for questions.
Hi.
Hi, Comstock. I was wondering, in like exploring your like little tools, usage on these people that you've used them on. How have you found their kind of not really function, but ways of using them without assigning or assuming their use just because maybe it might look like a hammer, for instance?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe you can see me in this camera.
Yes.
I have been really pushing myself in these kind of test experiences to sit with the indeterminacy and just quiet myself to hear what the neighbor subjects are pulling out of the tools and just wait and see. And it's a lot of, it always kind of happens the same way where they are pulling out ideas of the tools that they recognize first and foremost, and then kind of using the tools on each other, and then slowly using the tools on themselves, and then I'll ask to kind of use the tools on them, and then there's some back and forth. So I think there was one person who said, "I'm really having trouble thinking outside of the box." And to me, it's really not about that. It's kind of whatever's unfolding and occurring, and whatever, not resisting that urge to identify and to be the prescriptive knower of an object, just bringing that in as well and accepting that. And then usually when we're willing to say, this reminds me of a hammer or a scalpel or whatever it may be, non-judgmentally, then that typically falls away, and then we can be more playful with it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Cyan.
Well, I feel really privileged to have the three of you reveal your inner emotions and talk about, how you process that through your art. And I think you're very brave that way.
Thank you.
You're here.